to use our familiar technique of joining to appointed vanishing points to create a couple of things which are very, very common and that you might need to use, and the principles of which will just help you to think through your perspective process in the future. The first one is a dining room chair. And as you can see, we're working here in bird's eye perspective below the horizon line because I'm putting in the front corner leg, which is the closest one to us that we usually start with, and then the other front leg and now the back leg. And as you can see now, I'm putting in the chair back, which goes above the horizon line. So we're moving into eye level perspective for that. Then it's a matter of putting in the furthest leg away from us and filling in the seat. And then of course you have it's a ladder back chair, so you've got the struts at the back, all following the perspective lines. Once we've finished that, it's time to move on to another very common object. And this time it's going to be a bed. So I'm drawing a common double bed with a headboard. And again, starting with the corner nearest to me, the front corner, then putting in the further corners, and finally filling in the kind of invisible corner, the one which would be hidden by the bed at the far side. But before we get to that, of course, we need to put in the uprights for the headboard. And once again, not forgetting to join to the vanishing points so that we get them all accurate. Then we can fill in with our outline so that we start to see the bed popping out of all those guidelines and construction lines, which can get a little bit confusing. And before you know it, we will have our bed. There's the headboard. Rub out that bit that we wouldn't actually see. Add a little bit of color just to help us guide our eyes, so we know that is the topmost surface, the palest one. Then a slightly darker color for this facing edge, and the darkest color yet for the other facing edge. Then we can fill in some struts in our headboard, and there you have it. Of course, you might like to get a little romantic, and then we can go and very quickly and easily make this into a 4-poster bed. And this will again take us above the eye level perspective, above the bird's eye perspective, and into more eye level perspective. Because when you're standing, you'll tend to be looking down on the horizontal surface of the bed, but obviously a 4-poster bed will go above your head, and so that goes above the horizon line. So here I am just making sure that I join my vanishing points for the 4-poster, and then making sure that I get all my verticals up to touch on the correct guidelines. And then it's a matter of joining it up. And so now that is looking good. Of course, you might want to put in some filmy curtains, and here's a neat trick for figuring out where the middle of the top surface or the top strut of that bed is. You diagonally join the corners of the squares for the sides of the bed, then take a vertical from the intersection of those diagonal lines, and that will show you exactly where the halfway point is of those stretches between the 4 posters. And then you can go along and fill in your curtains so that you'll end up with a lovely romantic looking 4-poster bed, all in perfect perspective. The final thing we're going to look at is something which we're going to draw quite big, but it's a tiny little object which you might have some need of somewhere, and it's a TV remote. So I'm drawing it from bird's eye perspective, very extreme, because one would tend to be looking down from a very extreme angle onto something like a remote. And the reason that I wanted to deal with something like a television remote, it seems like such a tiny little thing, but sometimes you might want to get it looking accurate. And the thing that becomes tricky is getting all the buttons in perspective. But it's actually dead simple. So once you've got your box in place, and of course you can round the corners and make this look a lot more futuristic, but we start with a basic box. Then you just put in a grid. So joining along the sides, making yourself a grid joining into the vanishing point on each side. And before you know it, you have quite a handy grid, and you can decide what size your buttons need to be. Of course, you can be much more accurate about what size the buttons are if you want to. And then match very carefully the accuracy. So get your edges of your buttons good and straight and following the guidelines so that you end up with a very neat and tidy looking remote. Once you've filled in all your buttons, you can go all the way down using the grid, or you could be more accurate with your grid. Show the vertical edges to make it more easy to perceive, and there you have it.